Okay, I don't know why Gene said before it was cold weather. It was 19 on my house this morning. I mean, what's wrong with that? This is a pretty good turnout for the middle of February. So, books for sale. Anybody who would like a business card of mine, I have them, and you can grab one of those. So why don't we get started? I did a barn survey of Lehigh County in preparation for my book in 2012 and 2013. I can hardly believe that was 11 and 12 years ago that I did that tour, a survey rather, of the whole county of Lehigh. Sometimes I ask people how many barns they think that are in the county, and they're way, way off. No one's even come close, assuming they didn't read the book. And that number is just shy of 1,700. Now that's 14 townships, and that's a lot of barns. Now I am going to quiz you on one thing. How many of those barns do you think still exist, definite barns, because of the architecture? You can look at the construction of it and tell that it was very likely built before 1800, meaning 224 years ago. How many barns? Do I have a volunteer? So do I have a volunteer for someone to guess how many barns are in the county, all of Lehigh County, those barns before 1800? Anybody want to volunteer? Yes, sir.
500.
500 out of the 1,700. Any other guess? Anybody?
1,400.
Who said that?
Me.
You did. Okay. Okay, do you know what that means? There's one. There's probably about 4 or 5 barns in the county that were built right around 1800. We can't be certain. But there's one barn that I'm going to show you tonight. It's in Upper Milford Township. It's on, what's the devil is that? Churchview Road? How many people know Churchview Road? A lot of you? Okay. And it's just before Route 476. You go under 476 and you travel it around. You go around there. Anyway, that is the only very definite pre-1800 barn in the entire county. And in Berks County, there's many more. I don't know how many there are in Northampton County. I'm just trying to give you a feel of what's out there. Lancaster County, probably dozens of them, but only one here in Lehigh County. That shows you the enormous attrition that's taken place in the last 150 or so years. The barn landscape has very much changed in all those years. Why was that? Because there was the Industrial Revolution. One big thing was the Industrial Revolution came along starting about 1810 and lasted when the really big impulse, when people were changing their lives in so many ways. They had to compete with things that were going on in the Midwest, actually, in Ohio and Indiana. Those people out there, the farmers out there, were producing foodstuffs very, very much cheaper. They were sending them to major markets. I know Philadelphia. I'm not 100% sure of New York City. But anyway, barn architecture changed a lot. So except for this one barn that I'm going to be showing you, it's very much different than what it was back 200 years ago. So why don't we get started? We're going to show photos of barns in Emmaus and also Upper Salkin Township and Upper Milford Township. Those are the 2 closest towns to Emmaus. I mean, I could have, yes. I'm sorry?
The lights down.
Oh, actually, I'm fine here. I don't know what other people would like.
Show a picture and then we'll know.
We're good? Okay, yep. So what kinds of barn? I'm going to have to stand over here a little because I will be reading from some of these things. I don't always remember what I read or what I wrote down. What kinds of barns are seen in this area? Emmaus has basically small barn sheds or house sheds. And that's all we're going to really see. I don't see a single solitary regular barn, except for one maybe. I think that's in Emmaus, and also the Knaus homestead. One excellent barn in Upper Salkin Township is a one-level ground barn. We'll look at that. I don't know what happened during the survey that I did back 11 or 12 years ago. That came out of nowhere. I never knew that that was there, and it wasn't in good shape then. Plus, we'll see some barn symbols and decorations and other non-construction related elements. Okay? Anybody recognize that barn? Nobody? Just a few of you. Okay. That is right on the turnoff to that road. I don't know what the name of it is. You pass that restaurant. I have a terrible memory for names sometimes. Okay?
East Main Street.
Yeah. And anyway, you make that turn there, and just before you get to that road, I guess it's a fork there, more or less, you see this barn. I've never been in that barn. Anybody know the owner of that barn? I'd really like to knock on their door and get in there and not know. I'm sorry?
I know it.
Okay. Can you see me after the show?
Sure.
Thank you.
That is Sebastian Canales' original barn.
Really?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Okay. Everybody hear that? That's a Knaus barn. Obviously, the roof fell in. It's not doing very well, but it could still be documented. Now, one thing I will tell you is that, pardon me, one thing I'll tell you is that, all right, the barn is a stone, what we call a stone standard barn. It has a symmetrical roof line, and it has those diamond insets, those diamond-shaped brick insets there. And Henry Glassy, I don't know if any of you know that name, but he was the folklorist of North America. Okay, one of the great brains that I've ever met. I met him 3 times, last time about 22 years ago, and he's written all kinds of things. Anyway, he came into the Lehigh Valley many years ago, maybe 35 or 40 years ago, and he said that's a very, very diagnostic, that's not a good word, a barn that you know came from basically the greater Lehigh Valley. Anyway, that's one of the few barns, and I guess that's in Emmaus. Is that in Emmaus? Yeah. Actually in Emmaus, yeah. Okay, next slide. Everybody recognize that? Yes? No? Yeah, that's the Knaus Homestead barn. Built way after the house. The house, I think, is 1770 or so. A log construction. What?
1777.
For the house.
Okay, 1777. And that barn is about 1880. Now, that's a good example of what? The attrition that I talked about before. Tremendous attrition through the years. Okay, I've never been in that barn, but it's probably post 1880 or so. It could even be maybe 1910, but it's probably about 1870, 80, 90, something like that.
I can arrange that.
I'm sorry?
I can arrange that if you want to see it.
Yeah, okay. Beautiful. What's your name?
Gene Clock.
Gene Clock. Okay, next slide. Now, I'm not going to be able to really tell you the streets that these barn sheds are on. None of them are big. This is probably the biggest. Anybody recognize that? No? Nobody? Okay, that is right across from the railroad track. Okay, and it is near the Moravian settlement area, down that side road or side lane or something like that. Anyway, it's not a standard barn. Standard barns are much larger. We'll see that in a few minutes. But anyway, I wanted to show that Emmaus is not totally devoid of buildings that we could consider a barn. It's just probably an accessory building to an older homestead that existed maybe back to 1850 or something like that, or even before that. Okay? Now, just to prove to you that I didn't lie, there's another shot of the barn, and just beyond that are the railroad tracks with a train going by. Actually, when I took that picture, there were 2 trains passing each other, not in the night, in the afternoon, I guess. Okay? This is another barn shed of some kind. I don't know where it is. It's in Emmaus. I think when I did the survey, I went up and down just about every single little back lane and everything, and I think I found 6, maybe 7 of these barn sheds. So anyway, that has a gambrel roof, and a gambrel roof is a roof that's opposite or different than a normal gable-ended roof. Okay, that has 2 roof slopes per half of the barn. So and there's hardly any of these barns gambrel roof barns, even if it's a very large barn that came in before about 1880, okay? Next one. And there's another one. Now you can see on the, anybody recognize that? No? Anybody not from Emmaus? Few people, okay. The entry into that barn is on the, it's facing the road there, and you can see it has sliding doors. So that was probably built after 1890 or 1900 or so, okay? Here's another barn, a small one, a little bit different than the other ones. We see now on that one eave wall, we see a door that is kind of reminiscent of a real barn, okay? And then we have the lean-to shed attached to it. Very small, it's right on the corner of, obviously, two streets, and I'm not sure where that is. And there's another entryway, but that one entryway with those metal wrought iron hinges is very reminiscent of a regular barn, okay? And yet another one. That one has a gable roof because it only has one roof slope per half of the roof. Okay, that might be a bit older. Okay, next. Now we come to our first real barn. Sorry about that. This is a stone to the peak standard barn. It's on the south side of 10th Street. So you travel up there, probably if you don't live up there, you don't have a friend up there, you hardly ever see this barn. But that's a stone to the peak standard barn. A standard barn, a standard 4-bay barn is a barn that has a bank to it. It's 2 levels. And that recessed wall that you see on the basement level that's facing us, is the area above that is considered the 4-bay. It's above the cantilevered beams that stretch over the recessed stable wall. Okay, and those stable wall doors are probably original. Do you know the owner of that? No? We're going, what were it, 3 for 3? And we have a couple of barn stars on the front, on that red front upper wall there. I don't think they're real, not painted there. They're probably plaques. Okay? Next. Here we have an Upper Milford barn. So we're going to cover Upper Milford for the next 15 or 20 slides or so. This, I believe, oh boy, it might be Limeport Pike. I'm not sure what that is. But in any event, there's 2 barns on that road that really looks very, very similar. They're right on the right next to the road. Here we have 2 barn stars. I've been really concentrating very, very heavily on looking at and examining barn stars on the exterior of the barns, but especially on the inside. And there's tons and tons of marks and everything. They're all over the place. They start to really peter out. They wander away after about 1880 or 1890 or so. But the barns prior to the Civil War are much more, pardon me, they're much more prevalent. The star on the right is called a rosette with a, I'm sorry, I hate to ask this, is this city water?
Yeah, I'll get you another cup. That's actually,
No.
I drank out of that.
I'm sorry?
I drank out of that cup, so let me get you some.
Good to know. With a sawtooth outer edge. Okay, that's a rosette. Rosettes can be 4-pointed, 5-pointed. Many of them are 6-pointed. Some 7, some 8. Rosette might be the most common symbol, except for Coca-Cola, the most common symbol in the world. It goes back thousands of years. And of course, it represents the sun, but rosettes are seen all over the interiors of these barns. I've been to barns where people have lived at a homestead for 50, 60 years. And I get the okay to go in there and I look at the various areas where I know I need to go to find them. And I show it to them. I find something and I go back and I drag them back into the barn. They never knew it was there. And that's not totally unusual at all. Now the star on the left could be considered a swastika. Now we associate that, of course, with the nasty people during World War II and everything. But actually, the swastika is a Sanskrit word, and it stands for well-being. Okay, so it had some very good connotations early on, and then it kind of lost that during the Second World War. I think the Nazis actually had the swastika as one of their great symbols, even from the 1920s or so. How many of you knew that Germansville, how many know Germansville? A lot of you? Yeah. Do you know that was Germansville? And it was changed because of World War II. And maybe World War I. I don't know that specifically. Okay? Go ahead. This is a barn. As you come out of the borough of Macungie, up Route 100, or down, I guess, Route 100, heading south, on the left-hand side is this frame ground barn, a one-level ground barn, this frame. And I got out of my car, of course, walked over there, and on that eave wall, facing south essentially, is this barn star. You don't see, for whatever reason, you don't see many barn stars on ground barns. Ground barns are far less frequently seen than the standard barns, but there it is. I don't know what kind of condition it's covered over, so it should be in pretty good shape, but it's in Upper Milford Township. Go ahead. Another one. Now this is important to me. This is pretty much, anybody recognize that at all? No. I didn't think it would be very remembered very well. I think it was right across the street, right across Route 29 from Herbine's.
Oh,
Okay, but that's been down for about 7 or 8, maybe 9 years. Anyway, that wasn't really a barn, but it's a shed of some kind. And anyway, I liked it a lot. I took a picture of it. It doesn't have to be on a barn for me to take photographs of it. And it's basically a 6-point rosette with other things articulating with it. And I'm not even really sure what that is. It's very unusual. That was probably painted maybe in the 1970s or 80s. I can't be sure. But it's there. It's preserved, at least in one photo. Probably some other people took it throughout the years, but at least it's preserved. And that to me is important. I don't know why that building came down, okay? This barn is illustrated in the book, and I like to use the word unmistakable. It's an unmistakable white barn. And there's something about white barns that I just really like. It's a very small barn. It is, brother, I'm just trying to give you a street, but I can't. Anyway, it's in Upper Milford Township. Very small, a 3-bay barn. You can see the bank. Now that was piled up, that area that leads up to the wagon bay, that leads up to the wagon doors, that was piled up, okay, to the doors for the wagons to enter it. That's one bay, the wagon bay or the middle bay, and on either side are end bays or mouths. So that is a 3-bay barn. I've seen standard barns even smaller than that. Okay? Now we can't forget the most important thing. In your community here, Upper Milford, Upper Saucon Township, are the trees. For me personally, I got into barns because of trees. I was looking at trees and identifying them in my early 20s, and I just went around and I was fascinated with them, and I soon found out that historic buildings were made of trees. And I don't know how much it was before I turned about 22, but I didn't pay that much attention to it. This I took a photo of during the survey, and it's a white oak log. You can tell by the bark, it's certainly oak, but by the bark you can tell it's a white oak. And it's probably about 20 inches, at least top to bottom, maybe not side to side. And there were 1 or 2 other white oaks that had come down. Okay? All right? There's the bark of white oak. It's unmistakable. We just lost the largest oak tree in all of Pennsylvania back in September. It was a 7-foot diameter white oak at London Grove Meeting in Chester County. Anybody ever been down there? 7 feet in diameter. Another oak tree was just almost exactly 7 feet, and that fell down 4 or 5 years ago. That was the champion tree. And the one in September that came down, that just fell over. The Longwood Gardens came in back maybe prior to that, maybe by a year or two, and looked at the root system, and he said this tree, even though the crown and the branches were full of very live trees, very live leaves and everything, they said this isn't destined that long, and it fell down. A kindergarten class was being held, and all of a sudden they heard this crash, and the tree came down. Okay, next slide. Anybody recognize that barn? Well, that might be tough because it's been down now for about 8 or 10 years. It was up during the survey, but that's right beyond that barn. It's not right beyond, but it's within maybe a quarter mile of that ground barn with that barn star. It's up on the left-hand side as you travel Route 100. This came down probably 8 or 9, maybe 10 years ago. The only thing that's left standing there, you can eliminate all that white, the gambrel roof, the shed in the front, only that stone wall remains. More attrition, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, next one. This is, I'm sorry I don't remember the names of these roads. Anyway, this is a great barn, 1820, has all kinds of marks and symbols on the inside of the building. This is what's called an upcountry posted barn. So the main section, which is the stone part, was built around 1820. You can see just below the peak, there is a date of 1820, and below that is another date, and I can't remember that exactly, but the shed in the front was probably built anywhere from 1880 to 1920 or so. The two combined makes it an upcountry posted barn, and I have a separate chapter devoted to that barn style or type in the book, okay? So a lot of these barns I only ever saw once and during the survey, so I don't know where this is. But anyway, what's nice about this barn, it's a standard 4-bay barn, and it has, instead of displayed loopholes on the end wall, which we'll see, it has louvered windows on the end wall and the rear wall also. Okay, those louvered windows came in at the very earliest, about 1800, but they really started to proliferate because things change like they do everywhere. About 1820, 1825, maybe 1830, okay? And this is a barn way down a farm lane that I don't want to say is a quarter mile long, but it's not too far from a quarter mile long. And it's on the west side of Mountain Drive. Somebody had told me about this place that was a really interesting spot. And this is a frame standard barn. I didn't have a full broad view of it in a photo, but it did have 2 barn stars on the front wall. Look at that little window. So that's kind of cute, okay? Sunman. This guy was an artist. He was a lot of things. He was a really, really interesting guy. He is an interesting guy. I saw him about 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago. Anyway, he accumulated all this stuff, artwork and everything. I don't know what he's going to do with it, but it's inside the barn and that's part of his handiwork. Okay? This is a barn. I don't know where it is, other than the township. Okay, here we have a stone to the peak standard barn. It's not a real big barn, medium sized at the best, but the end wall was plastered. I haven't figured out totally why some of those stone walls on the Schweitzers or the standard barns are plastered. It certainly probably prevents erosion of the pointing in between the stones, that's for sure. But the differential, sometimes they plastered the walls above the basement level, sometimes below. This is both, of course. And it may not be original at all. Maybe it was deteriorating after 20 or 30 years, and they said, we got to do something about that. Okay? I only show this because barns can be transferred into residences, and this is obviously a residence. And it may be an upcountry posted barn. The original could have been, it's not a Schweitzer with the asymmetrical roof line. I wouldn't really call this barn having an asymmetrical roof line. I think what it probably is a standard barn in the back, that's the main section, and then the shed that's on the front. And then they just changed everything around, so many things around when it became a residence, okay? This is one of the barns. Now I said, I told you a few minutes ago, when the two gentlemen guessed it at 500 barns, the other gentleman I think at 1,400. This is one of the barns that were built very close to 1,800. I don't have a front wall picture of this barn. I don't have a picture on the other side that shows continuous stone construction from the ground level all the way up. But this is an English Lake District barn. Okay, really interesting. It's on Shimerville Road. Anybody recognize it at all? It's just a wonderful barn. It's only stone to the peak. It's only stone to the eaves level. It really has no right to do that. Stone to the eaves level really didn't start to come in until about the 1830s or 40s. And in any event, they did that. I don't know why, but the interior of the barn is wonderful. Interesting thing though with that barn, it has the original Moustead wall. It's oak, but it doesn't have any symbols on it. None. It has one of the great German houses in all of the valley. It's stone on the first floor level and it's log on the second floor level, and the logs are like that. Okay? Here are the wagon doors leading into the barn, of course. I don't think those are original. Those look too bright and new, essentially, for a 220-year-old barn. But there it is, okay? This is a barn down the road by maybe less than a quarter mile. There's a date on the rear wall, on the upper corner, is a date I think of 1890. But look at if you look closely, and I'm sorry I don't have a laser pointer. Anybody have a laser pointer? I should have asked that before. Okay, anyway, it has the splayed loopholes, the slits, the thin, tall slits. Okay, those are called balustradas or splayed loopholes. They're 3 to 4 inches wide on the outside, and they're about 16 to 20 inches on the inside. They're splayed, they're angled, and they were to take aim at marauding Indians. No, they weren't. They were for ventilation. Okay? Those splayed loopholes go back centuries and centuries, not in America, but in Europe. Okay, this barn is really, really long. Where the 1890, probably the 1890 date stone came from the conversion, where it went from a gable end structure to a gambrel roof structure, okay? And this, I can go to that barn, I don't know what the name of the road is, but look at that. That barn is very different than the standard barns. And why is that? Because if you look at the end wall, that is a standard barn, again with a symmetrical roof line. It really is set into a bank. And there's not that many standard barns unless it's in a very particular vicinity where it's very hilly. You'll notice that it's set into a hill or a slope of ground, and a fairly severe one, and the barn is very small. It makes perfect sense. Do you see the correspondence there? That the terrain is hilly. It probably didn't have much tillable acres there, and you wouldn't need a big barn at all. And the one thing reflects the other characteristic, okay? This is the single, very, very definite 18th century barn in all of the county. This is on Churchview Road. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Churchview Road, okay. Just before 476, and it was probably built around 1780, give or take a year or two. And one of the families, I think their name was Stoller, S-T-A-H-L-E-R. Anybody know the name Stoller? Is that rare or fairly common? Anyway, that was a Stoller homestead. And you go inside those wagon doors, and it's a tremendously interesting building. Tremendously interesting. It was originally a Schweitzer. It lost its front forebay because of all the changes, of course, that were going on. But on the upper floor level, instead of being all stone or all frame or even all log, it's half stone and half frame. And that's what makes that barn so special. Okay? This is that barn off of Limeport Pike, if that's the right road. We're in Upper Saucon, I'm sorry. Yeah. So anyway, we have rosettes. Yeah, we have 3 barn stars, 2 rosettes at the end, and then in the middle, I don't know how well you can see that, we have a star that consists of 4 teardrops. Okay? And those teardrops may have had a connection to the swastikas. It's possible. I don't know that. I don't think anybody knows that. But it's, those teardrop barn stars happen with fair regularity in the valley. Okay? There it is. Okay, serrated or sawtooth periphery with a black band just inside of it. I know some barn stars that have triple bands. Okay, not real common, okay? Where are we? Okay. This is, again, I don't remember the road. But you see that post there, okay? And it's flared at the top. Look at toward the bottom, and it's more narrow toward the bottom, and then it flares out. And the reason for that is because it needs to be wider to receive that cross tie. And again, if I had that, my laser pointer, I'd be able to show you. Anyway, there's a timber that comes in this way, and there's a timber that goes across that way. So there's 2 tenons, mortise and tenon joinery, that has to have 2 tenons, one to go into that cross beam and one to go into the other beam. And that's called a gunstock post. And gunstock posts are not real common in our area, in our general broad area. They very much are in New England, but not around here, okay? That's why I took a picture of it. This, doggone it, is on Veracruz Road. Are you proud of me that I remember that? Thank you. No extra charge. Any event, that's a small standard barn. It has those asbestos shingles, I guess, on the exterior. But look at the decorations that they created, those diamonds. The one diamond in the middle, of course, is a little bit bigger than the ones on the end. But that is on the north side of Veracruz Road, basically the north side. Okay, next. And here we see another one of those barns, I guess on Limeport Pike, a 6-point rosette on the left, and a teardrop star on the right. Okay? Now, this barn, and I think this barn is the one with the gunstock post. This was etched onto the plastered wall on the interior of the barn. And look what date it has. I wonder what they were doing during the War of 1812. And there it is, 1812. And that barn, the interesting thing about that, whenever you have a date and it looks original, it's really nice to look at other features in the barn and to see, because knowing that various architectural elements change through the years, they evolve, that if those features, certain features correspond with the 1812, and in that particular barn it did. You don't see many carved dates or created dates on walls on the interior of barns as early as that. You see them starting much more, with more, not much more, but some regularity after that, after 1830 or so. Next slide. This is a special barn. This barn I know is pretty close to where the township connects to Lower Saucon Township. This is a two-section barn. The original section is toward us, or toward the left, and you can see that addition section all the way to the right, okay? 95% of the time in southeast Pennsylvania, you have barns and houses that were expanded upon. And 95% of the time, you have barns that, where the original section is the larger section, and the addition is much smaller. It's very interesting. It's true with barns, and it's true with houses. And that's a perfect example of the much larger original section and the much smaller addition section. And on the inside, it's very interesting. I'm sorry I don't have any interior shots. I did get into that barn. Look at the end wall closer toward us. You see that door hood over that door? A lot of you have had to seen that in the valley. Very, very common feature in the greater Lehigh Valley, in the eastern part of a number of areas, in the eastern part of Berks County, and northern Bucks County, northern Montgomery County to a certain degree, okay? This is the interior shot. See, I didn't forget the interiors totally. This is a Maustead wall, so if you go into a barn and it has a wagon floor, of course, the wall up next to it, rather, adjacent to it, that's usually in our area about 6 feet high. In Lancaster County, it gets smaller, which is kind of shorter, which is kind of interesting. These walls are about, and this barn is probably even taller. It's probably close to 7 feet. But here you have a fully exposed built-in ladder that goes all the way to the floor, or almost to the floor. You don't see that very often. It is around, but then you have the boards in back of the built-in ladder. So it just made for a nice shot, okay? And this barn looks very much like a barn in Lower Macungie Township. It's in the the Upper Saucon area, and you have 3 doors. I have a friend not in New York State anymore. He moved to Vermont, but he would call these the three sisters. I'm not calling it the 3 sisters, but it's very unusual arrangement of 3 original stable wall doors right next to each other. Most often, they're spread out by 3 to 6 or 7 feet, actually. But here you have 3 doors right next to each other. Probably the middle door is a foodergang, or a feeding alley. But that's a very unusual feature of a barn, okay? And I wanted to show you, now here again we have, this is a very interesting thing. Look at this is an upcountry posted barn. Although it's not supported like it normally is, you have the standard barn in the back, you have a plastered wall, and then the front shed with that shingle area on the upper floor level, and then you have that stone foundation. But you don't, if you knew the year of that mortar, if it was original, then it was original. But if it wasn't, it was added on. I hope to say, although farm crops weren't stored on the other side of that non-plastered wall because it was an open area, it would be interesting to make the comparison between the two, and you might figure out when that mortar or plaster was added on in the back. Maybe. Okay? This is the stone ground barn that I told you about. This is right off of Vera Cruz Road. You have to look back. If you do a survey during the winter, you're going to miss it. It may not even be there anymore for all we know. But it is a stone ground barn. It's not real common in southeast Pennsylvania. The great majority of ground barns are a frame construction. This one's stone, and it was not in good shape at all when I went there, but at least something is recorded of it. I'll have to go back there if I could even find it and see if it's still there. Okay?
What does that mean, stone ground barn?
A ground barn is a one-level barn. It's not a...
No, but a stone ground barn.
Well, it's made of
field
stone.
Okay.
It's made of stone. Quarried stone most often. Okay, next. Isn't that a pretty front wall, the blue? I like blue. Isn't that a coincidence? I made the lettering blue. Wow. Now, what's different about that barn? Any volunteers at all? I like to challenge people. Sir, you have your hand up. Oh, you were scratching your head. Sorry. Anybody want to tell us what is different about that barn unlike any of the other barns? It's a standard symmetrical roofline barn. Anybody? No overhang, exactly. Okay. And why is that? Why is there no overhang? There was an overhang, but not now.
They enclosed it.
I'm sorry?
They enclosed it?
Yeah, why? They enclosed it, she said, but why?
I don't know, I wasn't there. Needed more room.
Well, you're doing really well. Come on, you're halfway there.
For more storage, I don't know.
The reason is because starting in about the 1920s, there were health regulations. And if you had cows and such stabled and there was a dairying operation, they changed a lot of things. They ripped apart all kinds of things. A lovely government, they did that. They required that. I have an interesting story connected with that. And they very often put up a frame wall instead of the recessed wall. They put a frame wall there and they eliminated it, okay? There's a fellow in Upper Montgomery Township, Sam. I won't tell you his last name, but Sam's father, back in the 1930s or so, had a guy come in from his local place and say, "You have to change your barn." And he said, "You're not making me change my barn." And if you go there today, the barn was built in 1837. It's like it was originally. He just resisted, and that was it. So it wasn't even necessary to do that, but that's a whole other story. And I'm glad that he did that. He saved his barn. And that the original barn was put up, the original barn was 1748, a carved date. And anyway, so that was a partial story on that, okay? This is again, a stone barn. That metal piece on the one side is a S-shaped anchoring iron. It usually solidified a timber on the inside. So you'd have the stone wall in the middle and then the metal on the outside, and it would go into that timber on the inside and then secure it very tightly. Okay. Anyway, there were scratch lines on there on the mortar to make it appear like it's stone, so it's faux stone. Okay, do I have that word? Yep, faux stone. Good name. Okay. Here we could go a little bit later. Gamble roof. Remember I said it was 1880 or post 1880? And there it is. It has a frame addition on the other side, which I think also is gamble roof. So it had to be after 1880. Why did they make the gamble roofs? Because it increased the crop storage area up above. It really went crazy after about 1870, 1880. And that's why a lot of these barns got achieved the status of an upcountry posted barn, because they needed that extra storage space. So they're related, okay? And this is on, again, still Veracruz Road. And this is one of the few barns. We talked about the German roof structure, the Liegenderstuhl. This is a Liegenderstuhl in a post-1800 house. And it's a really great thing. I didn't expect to see that. The people were very gracious, and they let me see all of their rooms in their house. And there, lo and behold, we see a Liegenderstuhl in the roof. I only know of 2 Liegenderstuhls in houses that I've ever seen post-1800. The other one is the Oberle Farm in Lower Saucon Township, which isn't that far away, okay?
So what is a Liegenderstuhl?
Okay, yes, I didn't really explain that. Okay, so you have on the right-hand side, from the lower right-hand corner, going up at an angle, and it's much wider. It can get up to 12 to 14 inches at the top. The bottom of the rafter is maybe 6 or 7. So it has to be angled so that it can receive that timber in the upper right-hand corner. Okay? It has to be wide. There's got to be something there to receive it. And that's why that timber, it used to be called a truncated principal rafter, and I never liked that term. So I just changed it to a principal rafter. And anyway, that's why it's flared like that. So you have 2 of these flared timbers, principal rafters, on either side. And then you have a straining beam, which is that timber with that peg. It goes from one side of the barn to the other side. Okay, that's a straining beam. And the beam above that is called a collar beam, which connects the 2 common rafters, and then the end brace. Okay? That's a Liegenderstuhl. We have Liegenderstuhls in Europe back to the 1380s. So that's what, 600 years ago? Almost 650 years ago. Okay, next. This is an early, and that's in the same house, okay? And we have the floor on the top. Then we have a cross beam or a joist, pardon me, below that. And then we have what's called German paling, P-A-L-I-N-G, that rests on a shelf. And then in between the upper floor level, which you can walk on, of course, and that German paling, mortar, or wattle and daub, call it what you want. And what did that function as? Insulation. Got very cold in the basement of these houses. And so how did you protect yourself from those cold winter temperatures? You put in paling. And that's what that is. Not real common. It was common before 1810 or so. But there it is. And that's a really nice shot because that's a head-on view of it. Just like you see it, okay? This is a barn, again, on Veracruz Road. It has some wonderful marks on the inside of the Moustead wall. I thought I had that, and I wanted to show it to you, and unfortunately I didn't. It's a fair size, not big at all. It's a small to medium barn, standard stone to the eaves level construction. It has a date on the other side, which is probably the original date, I think, of 1857. Okay? Go ahead. This is another stone ground barn. A ground barn is a one-level barn. And this is right off, again, Limeport Pike, I believe. I hope I have that road right. And this is actually separated from the other house, from the house of the homestead. And they're two different properties now. But that barn is probably 1790. So that's one of the earlier barns. I just had a thought. That might be another 1800 barn, a pre-1800 barn. Okay, it never occurred to me. That's a rather funny thing because the house is 1790. So those two buildings were probably built at the same time, although I don't have proof. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Okay. Go to the next slide. Okay, this again, we have that overhanging hood above the stable. I'm sorry, above the door on the end wall of the basement level. And there's many of these door hoods on that front wall, on that front board, that has these teardrops. A lot of times they have swastikas, other times they have rosettes. That barn stall right there is probably 40 to 50 years old, I would guess. Okay? Okay, I put it in there. I mean, you know, I bought some lemonade. You have to buy lemonade from kids. Come on. And that's the end of our talk. I never did learn the name of that little fellow right there. But I think he was winking at me, and I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody.